Hi, welcome to Third Space Live. I'm Jody Peel from Third Space Life Charity. This is a show that offers conversations, ideas, and stories to help build mental wellness and hope. In a few moments, I'll be introducing our guest, Melissa Barry Appleton, who's going to be speaking us today about empathy and compassion. But first, learn more about Third Space Charity on our website at thirdspacecanada.org. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram. You can sign up for our newsletter on our website, and you can also view our recordings on YouTube, IGTV, and here on Facebook. I also wanted to do a quick thank you to Third Space Coffee, located in the landmark district of Kelowna, for supporting our charity. Learn more at thirdspacecoffee.ca. Today's June 9th, and this is episode 2B. 2B because it's a re-recording of a previous show we did together that had technical problems. So, what a time it is on June 9th, 2020. Over the past few months, we as a human species have mobilized in one unified global effort, perhaps for the first time ever in our existence, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've compassionately and actively engaged to end human suffering or reduce human suffering as far as the pandemic goes. Now, over the last 2 weeks, we've also witnessed the Black Lives Matter movement regaining global attention following the protests after George Floyd's death on May 25th in Minneapolis, Minnesota. What roles do empathy and compassion play in these, and why are they so different? How do we maintain compassion and empathy in the face of this type of anger and suffering and injustice without turning away or burning out? If we can weather this storm together, what else could we do together? What other amazing human achievements and suffering could we end? Melissa is here to help. I'm going to introduce Melissa now before I get her to join the show. She's a very good friend of mine. I have a lot of respect for her, and she's also involved in this charity right now, but she's a lot more than that. She's very well known in our community as a meditation and yoga instructor. She's the past executive director of the Enzo Society for Contemplative Engagement, and she most recently completed her Master's of Divinity Studies and is now an ordained Buddhist chaplain, which is pretty cool. Melissa has also worked as a music and recreation therapist and addiction counselor for a women's recovery center in Ontario. She's super passionate about people in our community, and she holds a keen interest in supporting frontline workers and others through trauma and grief. Melissa's married with 3 children, a really beautiful, friendly dog named Soma, and her husband, Lee, and her live in Kelowna. Welcome, Melissa, to our show. I'm going to unpin my picture and so that we can see you. Hi.
Hello.
Glad you could join us today. I'm so excited to talk to you always, but really excited to talk about this particular topic in light of the current state of the world. So I'm thinking maybe a great way to start would be to say, tell us a little bit more about what empathy and compassion is, and how do we use it right now in light of COVID and the BLM movement?
It's a huge question. Thank you so much for the beautiful introduction, Jody. Yeah, I guess I'll start by talking about how I woke up this morning. You know, I woke up, went downstairs, sat on the sofa and had a coffee while my husband was preparing for work. And I had like a little rant session. And then I caught myself in the middle of the rant, and the rant was really about the intensity of all the things that are going on in the world. And I caught myself in the rant, and I said to Lee, oh my gosh, you know, I'm going to be talking to Jody about empathy and compassion today. And it feels like really absent, even first thing in the morning, waking up. And what I'm experiencing, what I experienced this morning, is kind of been unfolding a little bit more intensely over the past 10 days. And it's a kind of dysregulation. I'm experiencing more dysregulation on a body level, an emotional level, and even on a cognitive level. Um, and I don't mind saying that, I mean, just because my practices are meditation, social engagement, and yoga doesn't mean that I've got it figured out, doesn't mean that I have it all together. I'm watching how these things unfold in all human bodies right here in my own body. So empathy is like the ways that we resonate with another living creature, both somatically in the body, cognitively, and emotionally. And I'm saying living creatures because I don't want to just keep this within the human realm, because it happens between us and animals. And it also happens to us kind of empathetic resonance with our environment, with the natural world. So this resonance that we have between things on a body, a cognitive, or an emotional level has like a spectrum almost of low intensity and really high intensity. And actually, for all of us, we have kind of an optimal zone where we operate the best. Actually, that optimal zone is kind of the sweet spot of where we're most connected to human beings, and also where we're most likely to be able to respond and engage with all kinds of worldly issues in our communities. And that range is different for every human being. And learning about that range for each of us personally is really, really powerful to know when we're kind of falling in the low spectrum and dropping out and disengaging, when we've gone way too far past and we're overstimulated, and maybe we're a little bit more sharp-tongued, overheated, and not acting appropriately or skillfully. And then how do we regulate ourselves to get back into the sweet spot? Um, I use the word empathetic distress or empathetic burnout. Sometimes the term gets in our culture attached to compassion fatigue, but I'd like to invite us to really consider how the fatigue happens at the empathy level. Because we're working with that spectrum, and that actually compassion is available all the time. It's like this free flowing response. In some ways, it's described as compassion is like that moment when there's a fluttering of the heart between human beings or creatures and the environment, and a natural response, an ethical response and engagement just comes forth without any cognitive consideration whatsoever.
So
So like,
some people might call that leading from the heart.
yeah, and there isn't really like, it's like if I get a thorn caught in my foot and it hurts and I stop, I turn my foot over and it's just throbbing. I don't stop and say, oh gosh, I think this would be a compassionate thing for me to do, to pull this thorn from my foot. I don't stop and think about it. It's like my hand just reaches for my foot and pulls the thorn out in one beautiful response.
That makes sense to me. That was a really good metaphor for me. Thank you.
So I would guess, I mean, I'm not even guessing, just from the people that I've spent a lot of time with over the past 8 weeks, most of us are sharing stories how it really feels like. A lot of people are talking about how totally exhausted they are, about how just on the verge of tears they are, how some of us really want to hide for a couple of days, or we're getting into fights with our friends over issues but we would never let it reach level. So, this morning I really felt how my view was so narrow this morning. It was so narrow. And I've stayed really low key today. We're keeping things so, so simple today, just to kind of watch my window of tolerance, to watch how my body is working and what it really needs, so that I don't get overstimulated, so that I don't get into empathetic distress. so that I will know how to respond. There's an enormous amount to respond to in the Black Lives Matter movement right now. And it's not enough for me just to feel overwhelmed. It's not a luxury for me just to feel overwhelmed and to kind of allow myself to stay in that state. I am responsible to work with my human body being so that I am primed, totally ready to show up in an awake kind of way and do the work that needs to be done for the people who are experiencing systems of oppression and not being seen and not being heard.
There's a lot to what you just said, Melissa. First and foremost, I wanted to address the fact that it seems like, just anecdotally at least, that the people, at least in my life, that I see day to day are all having similarities in their emotional ups and downs. And it seems to be hitting really hard right now for a lot of people. So if we recognize that in ourselves and all those features of it that you just spoke to, feeling grouchy or feeling this or that or the other thing, maybe you could help us talk a little bit more about, you mentioned regulating. How do you do that? That might be one step we talk about first before I say the rest.
Yeah. And all of us are going to find ourselves in different states, and we all have different levels of sensitivity as well. Some people are extremely, extremely sensitive. So literally they can feel on a physical level when they hear the news these days, what's going on. It's like they have a kind of physical sorrow or pain in their body. And then we also have at the other end, people who have been working the front lines in whatever capacity, who have reached epic proportions of burnout, who have experienced either firsthand trauma or secondary trauma, where it's getting much more difficult for them to understand when their body is dysregulating and how to work with regulation. So there isn't really one way and one practice and one approach for everybody. So my first invitation would be to always keep searching for the right practice, the right teacher, the right, online app until you feel something that works for you. As far as simple practices go, like what can everyday people do without having to take a meditation course or without even having to show up to like a yoga studio to a practice?
Or instead of drinking a bottle of wine.
Yeah, or drinking a bottle of wine, or I don't know, picking up the next gummies or smoking a joint or whatever, right? Whatever, or eating a bag of cheesies. I do this sometimes late at night, or binging on Netflix.
Okay, you're
So
making me really
simple.
excited about going home and
I know.
watching Netflix with some cheesies. But
Yeah,
instead of
yeah,
that, we have options.
we have options. So some things I suggest are, especially because of this time of year, first thing in the morning, if it's available to you in your community right now, step outside. Maybe go outside with bare feet and just put your feet in the grass or in the dirt and do a little bit of a walk around. A little bit of a walk around where you're out in nature. It can be literally a tour of your garden where you're walking in bare feet. You're taking in the neighbor's garden or your garden, and you're just outside. Phone is not with us. And it could be 10 or 15 minutes. And actually, this would be a really great practice to do before going to bed as well. And just as we're walking, to just notice that the body is breathing and to really take in the natural landscape that's around. Even if the natural landscape isn't beautiful, even if it's weeds, even if it's like the large garbage pile that your neighbor has that they've left piling for several weeks, just take in the entirety of what's outside. One of my favorite things to do is to stop, drop, and get down on the ground and put as much as my body's surface area on the ground as I possibly can. Again, no phone in the room. it's okay if you're disturbed. Like sometimes my teenagers will notice me lying on the ground, and they might come in and they might start chatting, but at least I have as much of my body surface on the ground as possible. And there's also, they're aware that I am not capable of doing things for anybody in that moment, that I'm in a holding space regulating. I think that long walks are really great. I think it's great to get some physical exercise. I think it's amazing to listen to music and to dance like nobody's watching. Um, I tend to drop out and disengage with people. I tend to isolate. So sometimes I have to force myself to reach out to somebody that I know that I'm in a safe zone with and say, I need to see you, another human being. It doesn't have to be like a big conversation, but I need you to lay eyes on me, and I need to lay eyes on you as another human being in real time without a screen, even in social distance.
Those are all amazing, Melissa. So helpful. Um, I don't know if you wanted to go on with the list, but I was thinking that would be a good bridge to talk about the next point, which was that it's our responsibility in the face of COVID or Black Lives Matters or anything else that's going on in our world. And there's a lot more to that. We talked about that in the pre-show. There's a ton going on all the time in the world. That we need to take responsibility to work on our regulations so that we can show up and respond compassionately to all of these things. Tell us more
Yeah.
about that.
Well, I mean, in the face of Black Lives Matter, I've noticed how my view is really broadened, and I tend to include the vastness of systems of oppression. So my mind has been, on the oppression of women, sexual oppression, gender oppression, Aboriginal people, bordered, like the list goes on for me, even like the oppression of our environment. And it's like, it's destabilizing for me to go so broad, so fast, to include so much, and to feel so small and almost helpless. So, but the thing is like, it's Black Lives Matter right now. And I don't want to dilute my attention from this, what's going on right now, even though everything deserves my attention. But in regulating my nervous system, I can kind of hone into that sweet spot and give attention to BLM right now while the time is hot. I mean, it's always been hot, but we're really being called right now. There are other issues, yes. And how do I just face this one right now? I mean, all of us will have certain things that it's like our special thing that we're most passionate about. It's the one thing that we fight for in our lives on this earth. Some people have two or three things, but this is the one right now. You know, it's for me. It's like, wow, COVID was really intense, but this has sparked a different kind of fire in me. This is a different kind of, even like from an empathetic response resonance, this has a different quality for me than COVID, even. Depending on our political stance, we'll be empathetically resonating differently to every situation. And it's really important to pay attention. Oh yeah, what's the difference in some of these ways that my body, my mind, and my emotions are resonating? Am I clear? Even like some of our biases are actually packed into the way that we empathetically respond to what's going on.
Tell me more about that.
Oh, I get so nervous about going deep into that because, gosh, some of my
Well,
political views might come
yeah.
out.
Well, and we didn't prepare to go down that rabbit hole for sure. But
Yeah.
maybe just say it in a different way, that so the way our body naturally responds to these things is different to some extent or partially because of internal biases we carry with us. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. 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 For COVID, um, I was really floored at the way that globally unified so fast. So fast. Um, I don't have a huge amount of, I don't know. I feel like I don't carry a lot of fear around death. I notice that in myself. My empathetic resonance towards my own death and the death of human beings, I mean, it didn't feel really, really intense. It felt really intense when I thought about people suffering, about people being alone, about people not having people with them while they're suffering or while they're dying. But the death part, just in and of itself, I didn't have a lot of empathetic resonance. I don't want to unpack what that means. I'm just sharing what
Mhm.
that's been like for me. And then I also noticed a little bit of like, I was enraged a little bit about how is it possible that we could respond so quickly in a unified way to this and not so many other things. That
No, I
elicited
feel. Hmm.
an enormous amount of heat in my body. I would get like tightness in my chest and redness in my face. And I felt an injustice just in that, you know? Um,
How can this be going on with the situation of injustice and discrimination and racism for 400 years
yeah.
compared to the COVID situation?
Yeah. And then, as Black Lives Matter arises, it's like, oh God, I felt deep sadness. Like, God, of course, how could I have been so sleepy around this? And as I'm educating myself, there's been lots of things I've been educating myself on over the past couple of weeks. It's like, God, I've been sleepy about this.
Yeah.
Um, and then how do I not stay in the sadness about that and
Yes.
to work with that and to get back on track and do the work that needs to be done?
So maybe that's worth just pausing for a second, that being upset, being dysregulated, being angry, being worried, none of that is helpful to anybody, ourselves or the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, so that natural response, right, where I talked about plucking the thorn out of our foot without even thinking about it, um, that happens when we're regulated. So, how am I going to respond to Black Lives Matter in a compassionate way, effortlessly and freely? It is when my body and my whole being is regulated. It's important for myself, but then every time I walk into a room in the presence of other human beings in any place in my community, I want to be regulated because I also understand how there's a coupling that happens between all human beings when they congregate.
Mhm.
And my steadiness creates steadiness in the room. The more steady people in a room, the more people who are able to regulate, the more people that can open their perspective, really take in all of things that are happening in the room, the things that are being said, and will know how to respond with amazing wisdom that includes everybody.
So I'm going to get you to re-say that because there was a little technical glitch. I think what you said was that the more regulated people in the room, the more
Yeah, the
effective.
more people in the room who are regulated,
Mhm.
they can have the capacity to bring other people along in that regulation so that we can actually hear each other, we can listen better, we can take in more perspectives, and a natural kind of compassionate wisdom can be responded and come through. Like this is like the difference between a rally that goes absolutely crazy and a rally that's demonstrated with um, kind of stable and regulated. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but it's interesting to watch um, how when people get in a room, how smoothly things can go, and I don't know how a shit show can happen sometimes.
It ties into another show I just recently did on communications during times of turmoil. And, having tough conversations or heated conversations around difficult, tumultuous topics with other people that may or may not share your history or your perspective or your political views, that would be helpful there too, because we need to be able to have meaningful conversations, not just rallies, but meaningful conversations in our homes, in our workplaces, etc. So you could apply
Yeah,
that too.
totally. I mean, if I'm in a room with somebody and we're sharing ideas and the other person's perspective on things is in complete opposition, or maybe is even somewhat violent or not considerate of people, body check in. I can feel like a little bit of destabilizing happening, kind of a turning in my stomach, the tightness in my chest. Um, my breathing changes. Usually I start to hold my breath in certain areas. And all of a sudden, it's like my lens starts to close right in. The ways that my body contracts is also the way that my mind contracts. And then I start to do this cognitive loop of my own perspective. What's my position? You know, I just start playing the tapes of really standing in my own position. And all of a sudden, I've lost the view of this other person. I'm unable to read, gosh, what's going on in their body right now? What am I noticing? Um, what is it that I don't know about this person? What am I not considering? What am I not seeing? How can I possibly include more? How can I listen to this person even though their ideas are in complete opposition and actually hold their dignity in the entire interaction and make them feel like we're totally engaged together? We're totally two human beings exploring something really important together.
Wow, that's powerful. That'd be amazing if we all could do that all the time.
Yeah, I'm not saying I can do that all the time, by the way.
Yeah. So
Um,
what you just described is working both empathy and compassion.
yeah, yeah. The more if I'm aware of what's going on in my own physical being, as the kind of fluttering of the heart starts to happen and I'm feeling moved in a situation, um, paying attention to the other person, opening my mind to include all the things that I might know or don't know, really thinking about what the other person is going through, and then responding from there.
Is that is this process of practicing ways to be regulated so that we can respond the way you just described, how does that connect or connect with the whole idea of compassion fatigue, or did we just dispel it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm also going to say like that some of the things that I'm talking about, um, I don't know. You'll find there's a lot of training out there right now on empathy and compassion. And that's not by chance. It's probably because it's something that's really needed in our culture right now. And I mean, even though I spent so many years working with some of the world's most amazing teachers on this practice, um, I am like a kindergarten in this practice. I'm still really trying to use it just in my simple day to day interactions as a mother, as a community member, as a friend. Um, it's a pretty intense practice. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah. Oh, you talked about
Well,
compassion
that's
fatigue.
helpful because we all need to know that there isn't a finish line here. It's a practice, first of all, forever.
Yeah.
And it's not always
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah. Like the whole thing, it was like I got to practice it in COVID. Now I'm practicing it in Black Lives Matter. Sometimes I'm practicing it with my 3 teenagers. Sometimes it's a major component in my marriage. It shows up in its own context in different areas. I guess I just want to say that, so the teaching comes from the Bodhisattva of compassion. And it's this deity that has like thousands and thousands of arms. And in each of the arms, held in the hand, is an eye. So you can imagine thousands of arms, thousands of eyes being held. And the idea is that there is a tool for action in every single one of those arms that is ready to go at any given time. And the eye in the hand is the clear wisdom in how to skillfully enact that action. And how does that happen? From a bodhisattva who knows, or a person, an engaged human being, a regular everyday person, any skin color, any gender, any race, who says, I am going to act. I know that there's suffering in the world. I don't even know that it's possible for all of it to end, but I'm going to show up and work with my human body, my human experience that I've been born into, to do the work that needs to be done anyways, all of the time.
Wow, you know, I'm familiar with the image of the multi-arms, and I never knew the story behind it. So that's great.
Yeah.
That's very
There's some,
powerful.
yeah, and there's some other beautiful variations and sidetracks to that story. But you know, we all have 1,000 arms. We have so many skills and so many abilities as human beings, and the capacity for so much wisdom, um, on a singular level and on a collective level. Somebody said to me recently, like, what can I possibly do? Like, how am I one person actually going to make an impact on what's going on? Um,
I've been saying that
and
for my entire life, I think.
yeah, yeah. And even having 3 teenagers, you know, who we've built the legacy of this world. This is the world that we're leaving our kids. Oh my God, that's a heavy weight to carry, as you know, Jody.
Mm-hmm.
And my number one thing, which is just wisdom that's been passed to me by other teachers, this isn't like some brilliant thing I came up with, is number one, get educated. I've got to spend time getting as educated as I possibly can. I need to really understand my human being on a physical level, an emotional level, on a cognitive level. And then I also need to know how to be in relationship with other human beings, because as we learn to work as a collective, we gain power and strength to actually implement change. And then, of course, in those groups, to make sure that, are we including as much as we can possibly include? What's really dark? What's really quiet? And what are we not seeing? What's getting left behind? And
Mm-hmm.
can we open the corners of the room to include more?
Wow. Powerful and inspirational for sure. So maybe before we end today, we can circle back to what's going on right now in the world. Having said all that, having these tools available to us, um, what are we missing, and what can we all do to move towards that ideal place? Is it just
Hmm.
a matter of us, too few of us have the understanding, education, skills to be able to regulate and to then be able to thoughtfully respond with compassion and empathy to situations?
Yeah, I guess I also, um, you know, I don't know who I'm speaking to in this talk. I don't know who the audience will be. We can't really know. And so I should also say that, you know, I'm speaking from what visually looks like a white female. And even though I have deep Aboriginal roots, and which certainly my life came from sexual oppression. And the other part of that is I have had an enormous amount of white privilege in my lifetime, which also means like all this education that I'm talking to you about, even this wisdom that's been passed to me, has been at the hands of the white privilege that I hold. So I don't have all the answers, Jody. Like, I'm aware that there are so many people who don't have access to the resources that I have. So maybe what I'm first interested in are, what are some of the biases? What are my biases? You know, what have I had access to that other people don't have access to? And how can I share more? And I'm also aware that sometimes I just want to get really comfy in my life because this feels really heavy and like a massive task to undertake. So I really rely on who else is interested in this kind of excavation. And when I gather with a group of people, what does the diversity look like in that group?
So that's a starting place. And I love how you said that part of what you're doing is trying to teach other people and give other people resources and opportunities to learn. And I know that it's a big part of your life. So there's food for thought, whether you're a community leader or a religious leader or a parent or a friend. That's something everybody can do, is share ideas and thoughts and what's wisdom that they've collected in this space.
Yeah. And then from all of the wisdom that we gather and the skillful way that we work with our bodies and how we emotionally regulate ourselves, we don't have to actually train in compassion. There is no compassion training. It's like at the heart of every single human being. It's just waiting to be unleashed.
Wow, that's really beautiful. And I believe you. And I hope that, and I know we will find our way through this. And I hope that we do it with as little amount of suffering as possible. Is there anything you want to say before we sign off today to wrap this up, or any words you want to leave us with?
I'd like to really invite all of us to consider the ways that people might be really tired right now or really exhausted, where some of their basic needs are not being met, and where generational and systematic trauma lives, and to be so gentle with these people as they need to move forward in their lives and to rise up into a healthy way of being in society in an inclusive kind of way.
Thanks, Melissa. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to seeing you again, not only
My
here at work
pleasure.
or on the hiking trails or on another talk. So thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you to all of you who joined us. Learn more about Third Space Life Charity at thirdspacecanada.org. Stay tuned for more shows Tuesdays and Thursdays on Facebook and Instagram at 8. We'll see you again soon. Take care. Be kind. Bye for now.